sometimes a score goes down. And then it's an exploration to go, well, hold on a second, why, what's causing that? What do I need to look into so that that doesn't, continue in that same way?
Welcome, everyone, to the Being Framework Leadership Foundation series. I am Enrique Acosta Gonzalez, and I am joined by Ariya Chittasy as we begin episode 12, Being Profile and the Process of Self-Discovery. Now, in our previous episode, we discussed how the Being Profile plays a role with individuals, the major features of the Being Profile, using the Being Profile in teams, some case studies, and Being Profile accredited practitioners. And in this episode, we will be covering the mission of making transformation more accessible. What is the Being Profile self-discovery course? The experience of the Being Profile self-discovery course, and practical use cases and examples. Now, Ariya, I am so happy to have you with me today as we get into this episode number 12. And I can't wait to dive into exploring the Being Profile and self-discovery.
Enrique, it's really good to be here with you once again. It was great going through the Bing profile last time. And yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing with everyone what we went through as we were supporting people through the self-discovery process. First, I want to share that this all came within this mission of making transformation more accessible. As you've seen, Enrique, with Ashcan and all of the body of work, there was so much that was being done to really articulate this whole problem, to support people to understand how they can undertake this transformation process. And that's where we found transformational coaching played a really important role. It was quite effective, right? But at the same time, number one, it wasn't very affordable. It's thousands of dollars per sessions in some, senior cases. It was not accessible to many, and it was not required at certain stages, right? So sometimes it's just too early and it wasn't appropriate. And what happened, you see, as we are growing the accredited practitioner base, it really takes something to become an accredited practitioner in this work. You can see how much there is to the layers of the Being framework. So people go through quite an intensive training period. They then need to sit and actually do debriefs, right? Being profile debriefs. They need to really sit and understand people's profiles. So it's quite a process. And then they, for example, sit and interview as one of the things as how we make sure that they are doing justice, you could say, to the interpretation of the Being profile. So with all of that, it does limit the accessibility. Yeah. So and let alone last year, for example, we launched the Being profile in the Spanish language, in the Persian language. So that was another issue, right? We're currently growing different languages that we have access to. So this was a big question mark for us, going, how can we support those who want to tap into the Being framework? How can we make it more practical? And we were also getting feedback from people saying they would prefer to ease into the conversation gradually, right? Sometimes it was quite quick or is chucking people into the deep end. So that was one comment. They were in search of longer term support. And again, there was a challenge because we couldn't sit there one on one with every single person long term. Even from the affordability side, that was a bit of a big thing. And then the last one was the privacy and the private experience. So a lot of the time we're talking about people's shadows, okay? The things that we really fear or our anxiety and things like this. And so having a way that people could self-reflect and go through this in a personal way, that also was quite important.
And I was
Okay.
part of those trainings in Spanish and accreditation through Spanish with Lucy. And so I understand full well the different dynamics there and going from the English speaking version to the Spanish speaking version, again, all that's translations. But I'm glad that the Engenesis went through getting that into the Spanish speaking people.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good you say that, Enrique. I mean, as an example, even going across languages, getting these specific words that really mean what we're meaning in the being framework, it's something. It's not that you just quickly translate each piece.
Right.
This body of work, you need to literally be it. And I think that's clear for anyone who has been listening in. There's so many intricacies, and that's really important. So yeah, that's the piece. And so that led us to what we now call the Being Profile Self Discovery course. All right. So this is an online, it's self directed video course. In a moment, I'm going to share what it looks like and how it all works. It introduces the Being framework, it introduces the major components and how to apply it in one's life or one's work. So it breaks down. We really distilled all of the key pieces to make it practical to it. It's approximately 7 to 8 hours of material. So some people, they ended up, when we actually interviewed them of how a lot of our teams were implementing this when we rolled it out. Some people, you could say, binged on it. They watched it in 2 days straight and they really went in. Others broke it up into 15 to 30-minute chunks, and then it took them about 2 to 4 weeks, gradually going through it. So it can be done in a self-paced way, and that was one thing that really made it more practical. All right. And then included in the self-discovery course, each person does their own being profile. So in the middle of the course, you press a button, it takes you to beingprofile.com. You start answering all of the questions, right? And we mentioned how the being profile works in prior episodes. So you answer all of those. At the end, it takes you back into the self discovery course and each of the scores of the 31 aspects of being, right? A reminder that each score is out of 10. 10 out of 10 means it's relatively more healthy relationship you have with that aspect of being. And then a lower score indicates that it's lower health in the score of that relationship. So you get to see every single aspect of being, what your score is, and then there are self reflective exercises that each person can connect that with what they're experiencing in their life, in their work, with the issues they're dealing with, or what they really care about, what they want to fulfill on. And then the last couple of things, because we were able to make it in this format, we could make it have lifetime access. Yeah. So I'll talk about this a bit more. People come back and they keep reflecting on those different aspects of being. And it's an ongoing support mechanism in their own time when because they're dealing with things, they have to make key decisions. And finally, there's an online community of others who are practicing this and the being framework, and then you're able to ask questions, go through different discussions.
I was one of those that that ate it in 2 days, just because I really enjoyed having the opportunity to redo my being profile and then get the difference, right? You mentioned that in our last episode, the differences in those scores and how much you have gained, or maybe how much you have drawn back. But either way, it was good to see that process go through.
Yeah, I think that's really great. I think that we get a lot of input on when somebody goes, they take one or two distinctions and they really zoom into that, right? They may reread that distinction, they may draw on different components in their life that, whether it's assertiveness, whether it's responsibility, commitment, it's coming up. And then when they see that come up in their being profile, it's quite a validation for them to then explore that, or vice versa. We don't want it to be all rosy, as you said, Enrique. Sometimes a score goes down. And then it's an exploration to go, well, hold on a second, why, what's causing that? What do I need to look into so that that doesn't, continue in that same way?
Very true.
Now, before I show a bit about the self discovery course, let me introduce who actually facilitates the course. So, I do lead the introductory sections of the course, and I'm bringing some of the background of the work I've mentioned previously around our work with businesses, entrepreneurs, startups, and the practical application. Now, we also have Lucy Faulkner, and you briefly mentioned Lucy Faulkner. So, Lucy has a background in organizational psychology and also in corporate and management consulting. But then she was one of the people who was really bringing the people side into corporations, into banks and things like this. She has gone in and done some of our advanced programs, ones run by Ashkan himself, going far, quite deep and intricate into the different components of the Being framework. And we're quite proud and pleased what she's doing today. She's actually leading the Being Profile organization as the general manager. She led the launch into the Spanish language. You mentioned that because originally she is from Chile, and she went and did a lot there. We had different CEOs, different executive teams part of that launch last year. And so, yeah, she comes in and she guides people through some of the key components of the Being Profile in the self-discovery course. Now, also John Smallwood, I also think he's been mentioned here and there over the Leadership Foundation series. So John Smallwood has a background, firstly, as a CEO of over 15 different companies in so many different industries, right? So that was his background. And he got coaching, he got executive coaching himself, and he really saw how much of an impact that made to him. That led him later in life to then become a coach himself. He wanted to impact the CEOs to then impact the organizations. And then for many years, he was a CEO, he was a coach of CEOs. But more recently, he has taken the helm of the Engenesis Coach Academy. He is the coach principal and managing director of the Engenesis Coach Academy. And I think that you have trained with him and things, Enrique. Like you've experienced some of our coach training. Is that right?
Oh, yes. I've been privileged to have spent some time with Lucy and get the practitioner part with her. And now I'm endeavoring on the Thrive side with John. And it's been such a wonderful experience to share some time and space with them.
Yeah, brilliant. So you see, this work is quite potent, and particularly in corporations. I mean, there are several global multinational brands where the executive teams are being trained in the Being framework, and that's the work of John, of Lucy. However, as you can tell, going in and having a one-on-one with John, Lucy, or myself, I mean, it's not accessible to everyone, right? It's thousands of dollars, and let alone our diaries, can only expand so far. So this is why I was quite excited, especially when we roll out the self-discovery course with our own teams, right? Our own companies and things. It makes it far easier to get everyone on the same page about their aspects of being, what's going on for them, and then developing a type of, you could even call it a plan of attack, right? A plan for their own growth using the Being framework in the foundations. So let me take the opportunity to share a bit about what it actually looks like and how we put the course together. So first and foremost, there are 6 modules, right? The first is the course overview. We allow people to understand how they can get the best out of the course, how to come in and bring something they care about. I'm going to speak a bit about this later, but that can be something personal. It can be something professional. It can be about growing a business all the way through to your career progression or relationships. We then go through the overview of the Being framework in module 2, the core components of the Being framework, things like the fulfillment pyramid. And there's also a bit of a background interview with Ashkan where he goes a bit deeper into how he came up with the Being framework. Some of that you've heard in previous episodes as well. We then have the person go and take the Being profile. And then inside the course, you have the opportunity in this section, in section module 3, to go in and do your Being profile, as I mentioned, right? So it takes you to the Being profile website. You'd start doing the 244 questions. Once that's complete, it comes back and you're able to see your actual scores. So let me share that over here. It is pulling your personal score for that aspect of being. And then you have the opportunity to go through each aspect of being and really reflect on what that means for you. All right. So that is the meta factors and moods in module 3. It goes into the primary ways of being in module 4, secondary ways of being in module 5, And then module 6 is about additional resources and different pathways forward from there. So let's actually share. Let me share the introductory video so you can get a bit of an idea and get a feel, and then I'll continue on with one particular example.
The being profile is an amazing tool to give you a very clear perspective of the health of your relationship with various set aspects of ways of being. So you can get a very clear picture of where your starting point is.
So when I tell people what the being profile is about, I tell them it's about performance, whether it be in the corporate world, whether it be in relationships with husbands and wives, with partners, with siblings, with your parents. It will always boil down to how you're performing in those areas.
One of the key distinctions out of the Being Framework process was the description of the responsibility, where responsibility isn't so much a burden, but a worldview. It's a much more powerful way of looking at situations and looking at dynamics. Now, that was really taken on by our team to the extent that pointless gossip or complaining, there is so much less of that happening. And if it does happen, it's picked up pretty quickly. It saves us a lot of time.
What's really great about the Being Profile is it gives you a complete holistic snapshot. How is your world actually evolving around you? And also, how is your world shaped by your own way of being?
Once we filled out the being profile and we got to see that things weren't as scary as what we assumed it was going to be, we just got to see the areas that we were effective in and we weren't effective in, and things weren't looked at in a negative way. They were in more of a positive way of things that we might just need to look at to work through.
So for many years, I've been trying to measure some sort of ways of being, including self-compassion, forgiveness, through validated instruments. But what's important with the Being Profile is it integrates it in one place. It kind of brings it all together.
What the being profile allows us to do is look at who you're being now and map where you want to go and how to get there, but not from what to do, but from who you're being.
When I was first introduced to the Being Profile was when we were doing some training with the management team of another organisation. And it really gave us what I was looking for, which was a way of having a conversation with members of the management team of another organisation as well as mine about taking on what it was that we were responsible for and having a sense of ownership. So instead of having stories that were all about how busy we were and how stressed we were, giving us conversations where we started to get excited about the possibility of partnership.
So what we had there was a lot of the different Being Profile accredited practitioners from around the world sharing about some of the benefits that they have been able to bring for themselves and their clients using the Being Profile. Now, doing the one-on-one debrief is still definitely the most impactful pathway, right? To sit with someone that they work out one-on-one, how does the Being Profile make a difference to you? And many people who start with the Being Profile self-discovery course, then they choose to go and take that step. But this is a really powerful step if someone isn't either ready for that or if they just don't have the means to go into that level of commitment. So let me now go through one example of one of the aspects of being so that people can get an idea of how it works. I mentioned that the person, they complete their Being Profile, they have their score in front of them, and then they go and view the video, which goes through how they can reflect on that score, what a high or low score means. So let's take a moment to look at self-expression as one example.
What is self-expression for you? Where are you self-expressed? If you take a moment and think of a time in your life when you were fully self-expressed, when was that? What was that like for you? Is there a difference between how you were then and how you are now? When I think of self-expression, I usually think of young children. They can be free to say, do, play, act in any particular way that they want to. We see them in a playground and they're creative. They're fully unleashed. They run around with not a care in the world, seemingly. Where does self-expression get in the way for you? What does it cost you when you're not being self-expressed? What is the impact on the people around you?
Self-expression. Self-expression is when you intentionally and authentically communicate who you are and how you are, including but not limited to your points of view, beliefs, values, feelings, emotions, moods, and experiences. You may express yourself freely and creatively in many ways through your work, speech, body language, facial expressions, music, and other creative arts or ways. It is the state of being uninhibited and resonating with life and everything in it, and may evolve to become your unique contribution to humanity. A healthy relationship with self-expression indicates that you mostly experience being free to project yourself in various ways with others, regardless of circumstances, leading to satisfaction, joy, and fulfillment. You are self-expressed when you unleash your qualities to be seen, heard, and appreciated. An unhealthy relationship with self-expression indicates that you may frequently experience being suppressed, restricted, and constrained in how you interact with others, commonly leading to a lack of both fulfillment and satisfaction. Others may experience you as inhibited, quiet, reserved, or shy in different circumstances, or to have hidden or rarely seen talents and qualities. You may hide your passions or interests from others for fear of judgment or ridicule. Alternatively, you may have few filters and be considered blunt or overbearing. You may disproportionately value your contribution and feel the need to outshine others. You may also be uncomfortable with silence or not being the center of attention.
When you have a healthy relationship with self-expression, you communicate everything that there is for you to communicate. The people around you get to see the real you. Alternatively, a less healthy relationship with self-expression may show up in some different ways. You may be overbearing. You may not have any filters. You may interrupt people or speak over the top of them. Or you may be someone who completely hides things and you suppress everything so that nothing gets communicated. Where are you self-expressed? Where are you constrained? What's the impact on you, and what is the impact on the relationships that you have with others? As an exercise, I invite you to look at the past year. Notice where you may not have been self-expressed. Take note of those instances and then look at what was the cost, what was the impact on you, and what may have been the impact on others when you are not being self-expressed.
I'll pause it there. I think that should give people a really good idea of what it's like. You can see that we've done our best to take the coaching process around someone's being profile and put it in a way where, in this case, John Smallwood is directly working with you and bringing up those questions. How did you, going through that once more, Enrique, how did it land for you? How did you experience this example?
Yeah, I love this course primarily because it gave me the opportunity to go back individually on my own, having had already the experience of having a debrief with a coach for 2 hours. And it just allowed me to explore the profile a little more in depth. And I really appreciated having that time to do so.
Yeah, that's really great. So with this and what we just left off with there, these coaching questions come up, and then there is an interactive resource, a type of fillable, question and answer sheet where you can then put in your responses and that's just there for you, right? So no one necessarily reads it. No one has access to do that. You just are doing it for yourself, going deeper and really allowing it to sit. How does this then impact my self-expression, my conversations in my life, my decision making, and my interactions with other people? All right. So with that, let me share with you, as we started rolling this out to more and more people, the experience that people go through as they go through the Being Profile Self-Discovery course. So many come in initially with this strong sense of curiosity about what they will discover about themselves, how it will impact their perspective of life. And as they delve deeper, some parts of the course really come to challenge their existing beliefs and their perceptions, moving them through points of confusion or unclarity, right? We've had people who have had these decent, significant life experiences, sometimes challenges, pivotal points. And then as they go through their being profile, they see them in a completely new light, and things make far more sense. And so that's the next point. Breakthrough moments during the course can lead to sudden clarity, deep insight about oneself and one's life, bringing a new experience of things making sense. And the process of uncovering deeper discoveries about oneself can have people feeling vulnerable, especially when confronting aspects of themselves they've avoided or suppressed. I know that you and Ashkan spoke about the shadow side of ourselves, right? And so this is what we are encouraging in the Being Profile Self-Discovery course. In a private and personal way, in a self-paced way, people are going and really touching on these things that can be easy to avoid, and easy to neglect. And then after gaining insights into their patterns of decision making and their behavior, some develop a strong sense of empowerment as they see clearly what they can influence. And that's the real pivotal point in the end, right? Is that we don't want this to just stay there in an abstract way. And this is why we went and built these types of tools and these practical applications, while we completely, I mean, you can see all of the work that we've put in for the Being book, and Ashkan has put into Human Being book, etc. We didn't want it to stay on the shelf. Okay, so this allows us to, in a wider way, make it far more accessible. People sit there and they're able to get themselves on the same page for what the Being framework means, which is really great in teams, but also what it means in their own personal life, in their decision making, and so on. Now, let me go through a few real practical use cases and examples, because you can see even in the video that we shared, there were so many different pieces here, right? Boardrooms, and then in someone's personal life. So these are some of the common ones we see that people shared with us as they went through the self-discovery course. But also, as you can tell, I mean, even as you were speaking about it, Enrique, some people are doing the debrief, some people are working with a coach. I mean, there are many different ways that you can go and explore your own being. And so there's definitely a bit of overlap here for someone who adopts the Being framework. But let me go into it as an individual. So from a personal standpoint, people who want to understand themselves and their emotions, they've said that they got a lot out of the self-discovery course, that they can pull apart different aspects of their being and how that impacts how they feel and experience their own life. Authentically expressing themselves. Sometimes we're suppressing parts of ourselves. Sometimes we think that we shouldn't be bringing that part of ourselves out. And this really plays a role there. Digesting your life experience or major events. I remember speaking to people who were moving from corporate to working on their own business, exactly like Joran in the Becoming book, The Emergence of Being. When people are going through major transitions, really tapping into what aspects of being do they need to bring, or do they need to shift so that they can be effective in that next phase of their life. Getting clear on what they want and what's important. This is an interesting one. You see, if you have gaps and shadows in empowerment, in freedom, in commitment, it can really make a big impact on how you're setting even what you want in your own life. You might think that certain things are not possible if you're unclear about what aspects of being are playing a role. Addressing doubt and fear and developing authentic confidence. This one I really love. I've had recent examples of founders and entrepreneurs telling me that they're coming out of sales meetings not because they have a far better pitch, but because they really tapped into that authenticity and confidence from a being level, and then that made a difference to how they run their meetings, right, and their pitches. Now that overlaps professionally with going through transition points in life or work. We discussed that. Expressing yourself powerfully and communicating at work. Yeah, a lot of the time we have people who are hard workers, but they're not communicating what they're doing, or they're not communicating their initiatives. And for example, then it gets, the credit gets taken by another person, right? So these are the types of things that come up that people bring into the self-discovery course. Consciously choosing their next career direction, or dealing with troubled situations or challenging team members. This is a big one, obviously. I remember one of someone the other day saying that they were dealing with this team member who kept creating all of these different stories, and it was making it harder and harder to just do their day by day role. Do any of these stand out for you, Enrique?
Oh, yeah, especially the one about not being able to communicate your career decision or what you're doing for the team, because a lot of times a lot of effort was put into it. And I had the supervisor tell me straight up, he says, "Hey, Enrique, you do a lot of great things no one knows about." So
Yeah.
it really does tend to really affect us professionally.
Absolutely. And a lot of the times we say that then that costs you.
Mhm.
And in the exercise before for self-expression, we said, how does it cost you? And we find some people think that we mean it in a metaphoric way. Yeah. As in it costs you sort of, it's a headache or a burden. But as you're saying there, Enrique, sometimes it costs you real hard cash, right? Like
Yeah.
you lose a promotion. Yeah, it could impact a decent way of how you're having your livelihood. So this is what we find when people really take that time. It takes something. You can't sit there and passively watch this like you're watching Netflix or something. You really need to bring yourself to be with the conversation that's going on. But then it can have a drastic impact on the decisions you're making in your life right now, the conversations you're having, or the actions that you're choosing to take. This is how it bridges over. So let me go into one more section of these practical use cases and examples in how you deal with others. Because remember that the Being framework is like this lens. Once you have this higher resolution lens and install it, you can choose to look at yourself, or you can choose to look at others. And so when it comes to others, on a personal standpoint, unblocking issues in personal relationships, those sticky issues, sometimes they hit a roadblock. A lot of the time, different aspects of being, you can pull them apart, and it will give you new options, and you'll be able to see new ways to deal with the same issue. Better understanding where others are coming from. Okay, so sometimes you just feel like you're completely on the different wavelength from someone, and when you start to understand their awareness is different to yours, and you start to understand their moods may be driving them in a certain way, you have this different ability to really understand where someone is coming from and have a more ontologically appropriate response. The ability to better read others in terms of their coercion, manipulation, or deception. I think that we've all been at the tail and the receiving end of someone who didn't have our best intentions at heart. And sometimes we can be blind to that, right? So this really being able to use that lens, see how others are being. The next is enhance their ability to communicate and influence others. I think this is a big one. For example, in the Engenesis Influence Leadership Program, it's a 3 month program where we really zoom into this. We're looking at how does your being impact how you're influencing and communicating with others, whether that's personally or professionally. And then freeing oneself of inauthentic, externally imposed expectations. All right. So these are things like the norms we have right around us, and different rules that sometimes we buy into, which are actually really holding back our full self-expression. Okay. Then professionally, creating trust and cohesion in work environments. This is a big one, especially for people leading larger and larger teams. They're looking at how do our aspects of being go to create that unified, mission. Okay, moving past being polite to dealing with pressing issues. That came up in one of those videos that we showed. In boardrooms, this is huge, right? I was talking to the executive team of a $500 million company the other day, and they were talking about how the board is simply being too polite, and that is turning into a lot of the same issues circulating again and again, and no decision making is really happening. All right. Addressing dysfunctions within teams, I think that's quite self-evident, and increasing team performance. So when it comes down to real cases of how do we need to make a decision here and how is that going to impact our team, that seeing the connection of the certain aspects of being and what's happening there. Last episode, we actually spoke about that $10 to $15 million mistake, type of case study of people who saw that vulnerability was playing a role in that issue. And then finally, this is a repeat, dealing with troubled situations or challenging team members. That also obviously happens at team levels and organization levels. And so in this one, again, does anything stand out for you, Enrique, as we use the lens to view others?
Yeah, the too polite, and everybody wants to get along, and that is perfectly fine, right? They should, but there's sometimes that you cannot proceed because you can't bring to the table the current and truthful situations that are going on, and it is one thing that we as professionals need to really get over in the best interest of the whole, right? And you do not have to be mean to be assertive, as we well know that element of the being profile, but things do need to get addressed.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you can see that there's a lot here. And it's no wonder that when people work one on one with a Being Profile accredited practitioner, they are going to all of the little intricacies and nuances. How do those aspects of being impact them? And so if I recap, we know that more in-depth work can be really helpful when someone wants to shift their team performance, their personal performance, and so on. But as you can see, the piece that the Being Profile Self-Discovery course holds, it's a really important piece for people to introduce themselves in, start experimenting, and start taking on different ways of being and seeing how that plays a role. And so what's been able to happen there now is that we've rolled it out. We've been able to have, instead of you needing to be introduced or invited by a Being Profile practitioner to do the Being Profile, which was previously how we had it set up, we were able to open it up now to people to come online, take their Being Profile, go through this, and then start really playing around with, okay, what are the different aspects of being that could be in my way? And how might I treat that differently? How could I try something on? And so that's played a big impact. We then see it could be in situations of teams where we just don't have the time capacity to go and sit with everyone one on one. 50 people can go and view this at the same time. And then, for example, we can run group workshops to then dialogue about that. So there are a lot of different ways. Obviously, each person will have their own pathway for how they go through that personal transformation journey. But we did want to emphasize our overarching thought process, how the Being framework has been now turned into some of these practical applications and tools. Great. So let me take an opportunity to share. We think it's quite important for people to understand that at Engenesis, we created the Being framework, all of the professional research. We really wanted to make a difference. Now, some of those pieces, for those who are more committed or they really see that they will get a direct benefit and want to invest their time as well, there are different commercial aspects to what we do. And that commercialization has obviously contributed to our ability to even do this whole series of episodes with yourself, Enrique, to share a lot of this knowledge publicly and keep doing the research that we're doing. So to line some of those up, this is just a small sample. I've got here a few different videos that we'll put also in the show notes. You can go and explore yourself. So one of them is more about the being profile and the debrief process itself. So that is one thing people choose to do. They sit with one-on-one with a being profile accredited practitioner. It's been mentioned a few times through this series, and they then get that personal touch to see how does the being framework connect with what they care about. So there's a video on that called "What is the Being Profile," and a lot of people share what they get out of that process. We have one on the Being Profile Accreditation program. So that's for becoming a practitioner, somebody who wants to utilize the Being framework in their own work. That can be a coach or consultant who wants to get results with clients and using the Being framework and the ontological model with their clients. Or it can be for leaders within organizations, CEOs, HR managers, internal coaches, or people and performance specialists who want to work with their own staff. And then we have the Thrive Coach Training Program. So this is where we are bringing ontological coaching, and not just any ontological coaching, but particularly utilizing the Being framework ontological model, bringing apart different layers of people's being, seeing what moods are driving people, seeing what aspects of being need to be taken care of, so that through the coaching process they can be addressed, and then the client or the coachee can then receive those benefits. Now, this is just a brief sample of some of them, and again, we're going to put them there in the show notes so people can explore for what might make sense if they want to learn more. But we also have other programs that you can learn more about on engenesis.com. And particularly, there's a more senior and advanced program that Ashkan runs himself that goes for 12 months. It's a bit of an invite-only program, but he goes quite deep, right, to a lot of the intricacies of behind the Being framework, let alone some of the work that is coming up in the future. So it's important for us to share this, Enrique, to the audience so that they know, number one, I think you can see authentically we have a decent vision ahead of us, and we want to keep growing our impact in how the Being framework is going in and transforming people's lives, right? Almost every day we're getting different stories from boardrooms, from entrepreneurs, from individuals in their relationships that this work is making a difference. So what's key for us is to make that clear, how also our operation works, right? We do have these commercial arms and different options if people are interested, and that supports us to continue to also provide a lot of these free and low cost ways, things like our books, etc., that people can gain access to the Being framework and start making an impact for themselves and their own lives. One important note that I wanted to bring up is that transformational work can get lonely. And this is where we found being in a community makes a huge difference. When you're going to those shadow sides of yourself, those troubled parts of yourself, and you're really authentically confronting, what will it take for me to get that part of my life in integrity, right? To hit that target, to be effective with what I care about. So these are just a few images of people who are taking the Being framework. So in this one and the next one, the Being book and the Human Being book, into their lives, and then they're adopting it and they're practicing it. But one of the initiatives that had come out of that is that time to time we run self-discovery courses that are guided. So a practitioner comes in, they have a group of people going through the self-discovery course, and that's also something that you can come in and access. And we will put the details there. So hello@engenesis.com is one of the simple ways you can get in touch with our team, and they can let you know when those are running. And the second one is for team inquiries. So some people are looking at bringing the self-discovery course into their team, and for example, running different facilitated workshops. Hello@engenesis.com is also the best way to connect with our team to get more information if they wish. And finally, to access the self-discovery course directly, we have the link here. It's engenesis.com/courses/self-discovery, or you can go to engenesis.com and click courses, and you'll see it there. So yeah, with that, Enrique, yeah, I do hope that people are connecting the dots actually between all of the background work that has been done to set up the Being framework, why we did that, but then also this quite particular way that we at Engenesis really see the importance of this work making a difference to people, having practical application, real tools that you can use on the court and in the field.
Well, it's been so good sharing this information with those that are listening or viewing. The Being Profile and Self Discovery course has been a blessing to my life. I know that all those that will partake in it will find that to be the same for them. But Ariya, it's been great to have you on episode 12 Discovery course and the Being Profile. And as you've well stated, a life changing thing.
It's a pleasure, as always, to be with you, Enrique. And yeah, thank you, each of the audience, for listening in today.
Now, I want to remind everybody that this is a part of a series that we'll be doing throughout the year, but it's also part of a complimentary course, a leadership series course that we would love for you to join. So you can go to Engenesis and find that course there and enroll. It is completely complimentary, and we love to have you. Until next week, where we go and find ourselves in episode 13. And I can't wait to get that conversation going.